The National News Desk, locally covered, nationally connected.
There were some issues here, and we addressed those issues.
They left us with deep damage, generational trauma.
Brand new video of what could be the heart of Minnesota's massive fraud scandal revealed. And the nation's border czar says he's pulling his resources back.
This action will save American consumers trillions of dollars.
It is a corrupt giveaway to big oil.
The Trump administration deals a final blow to the EPA's ability to regulate climate pollution. The landmark finding repealed. And the American dream inching away from millions of Americans, from home sales to mortgages. What it really takes now to get that white picket fence. From the nation's capital, this is the National News Desk, America's News. Now, thank you for being here with us. I'm Dee Dee Gatton, and on this Weekend Edition, we take a look at the big headlines of the week, and we look ahead at what to expect, starting with the 4 big stories we've been following this week. Lawmakers are pressing for greater accountability and transparency from immigration officials following the shooting deaths of 2 American citizens in Minnesota. House Intelligence Chairman Rick Crawford is sounding the alarm about alleged illicit biolabs linked to Chinese nationals discovered on U.S. soil. Plus, the U.S. is sending 200 troops to Nigeria to train their military to fight Islamist militants. And one of the nation's largest banks is now warning consumers to be on the lookout for impersonation scams. But first, a months-long immigration enforcement crackdown in Minneapolis is coming to an end. That's according to White House border czar Tom Homan during a news conference this week. Here's national correspondent Kelly Gaskins with more from Washington.
White House border czar Tom Homan says the administration is beginning a drawdown of federal immigration officers in Minneapolis after what he calls a successful operation.
I have proposed, and President Trump has concurred, that this surge operation conclude. A significant drawdown has already been underway this week and will continue to the next week.
At its peak, Operation Metro Surge deployed nearly 3,000 immigration officers into the area. The Department of Homeland Security says more than 4,000 undocumented migrants were arrested, but the crackdown sparked widespread protests and turned deadly. 2 U.S. citizens were killed during demonstrations tied to the operation.
We don't want to see any more bloodshed. I don't want to see any more bloodshed.
So help you God.
Meanwhile, on Capitol Hill, the Senate Homeland Security Committee held a fiery oversight hearing.
Because everything you said was untrue.
Democratic Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison testified alongside top ICE and Border Patrol officials.
I just was looking at, again, one of the flyers that was put out when it said how to impede ICE operations and arrest. And it told white people to put their body between the criminal alien and the officer.
Republican Senator Ron Johnson of Wisconsin accused Ellison and other state leaders of fueling the protests that led to the fatal shootings.
2 people are dead because you encouraged them to put themselves into harm's way. And now you're exploiting those 2 martyrs. Now sit there and smirk. Smirk. It's sick. It is despicable.
Ellison said he was simply advocating for the First Amendment when encouraging the protesters.
I freely admit being in favor of the First Amendment.
Border czar Tom Homan said although they are drawing down the surge of immigration officials that descended on the region, immigration enforcement will continue in Minneapolis. In Washington, I'm Kayla Gaskins.
A federal judge upheld her order postponing the end of temporary protected status for around 350,000 Haitians in the United States. The ruling came more than a week after she said the Department of Homeland Security could not end TPS. She says she will issue a written order before next Thursday, the next deadline in the case. The paused order was supposed to take effect on February 3rd. A federal judge has granted Arizona U.S. Senator Mark Kelly's request for a preliminary injunction against War Secretary Pete Hegseth. Kelly sued Hegseth last month after the Pentagon censured him for his participation in a video urging service members to disobey illegal orders. Kelly argues that his First Amendment rights were violated. Like President Trump, Hegseth has called the video seditious and has moved to demote Kelly from his retired rank of captain, which would result in a cut to his retirement pay. New video released by the CIA is a recruitment tool for new Chinese spies. The Central Intelligence Agency posting this on their official YouTube YouTube page narrated in Mandarin of a supposed Chinese military officer who leaks state secrets. It comes weeks after a top Chinese general was found to have leaked secrets to the United States. CIA Director John Ratcliffe says we're going to continue offering Chinese government officials and citizens an opportunity to work toward a brighter future together. TikTok is now facing formal charges in Europe over concerns the app may be addictive. Let's go to Emma Withrow from the Fact Check team. And the EU, Emma, is targeting TikTok for its features. Tell us what specifically they're saying is harmful.
So the European Commission, which enforces the EU's digital laws, they argue that TikTok's design features things like infinite scrolling, autoplay, and highly personalized recommendations might create some addictive patterns of use, especially among minors. Under the Digital Services Act, very large platforms are required to assess and mitigate what they're called systemic risks, including things to risks to mental health, also child safety. So regulators are basically saying TikTok hasn't done enough to reduce these risks.
And we have heard these concerns before.
Yeah.
What happens next? What could this mean for TikTok?
So if the charges are upheld, basically TikTok could face fines of up to 6% of its parent company, ByteDance's global annual revenue. Huge amount of money. Beyond fines, though, regulators could also require changes to how the platform functions in Europe, potentially even forcing design adjustments to reduce these types of addictive features that they're calling. TikTok also says it disagrees with some of the Commission's preliminary findings, and they argue that it, has introduced safety tools, including screen time reminders, parental controls, that sort of thing. But this is really part of just a broader push to uphold these large platforms in the EU, hold them accountable for how their products are impacting users, especially kids.
Emma, thank you. Important discussion. Later on, Emma's going to be back to dig deeper into the science behind social media addiction. At the White House this week, President Trump ending the Obama-era endangerment finding, a regulatory program designed to cut emissions of over-the-road vehicles. Trump saying the regulations were overbearing and a danger to the auto industry. The National News Desk, Jeff Harris, digs in.
Both Trump and Zeldin making the announcement at the White House Thursday afternoon, saying the action would eliminate vehicle greenhouse gas emission standards for model years between 2012 and 2027, claiming the move would be a big win for taxpayers, saving over $1.3 trillion. From the White House Thursday, President Trump and EPA Administrator Lee Zeldin formally announcing they are dismantling the Obama-era endangerment finding.
The Trump EPA has finalized the single largest act of deregulation in the history of the United States of America.
Trump calling the finding a radical rule that became the legal foundation for the, quote, Green New Scam.
One of the greatest scams in history, probably as great, maybe even greater than Russia hoax, etc.
The Obama administration issued the finding back in 2009, which determined that 6 greenhouse gases, including carbon dioxide, methane, and nitrous oxide, endanger public health, leading to a number of restrictions and rules for vehicle manufacturers across the country. Zeldin noting the rule does eliminate off-cycle credits for automakers, specifically removing incentives for the engine startup feature.
We are ending the federal government's push to get manufacturers to install that Obama switch.
Shortly after the announcement, Obama weighing in on social media, writing without the finding will be, quote, less safe, less healthy, and less able to fight climate change. Also, the fossil fuel industry can make even more money. Multiple environmental groups also speaking out. Earth Justice confirming they will pursue litigation, and California Governor Gavin Newsom posting on X, California will, quote, fight this lawless action in court. But Trump pushing back, saying the move will end up helping Americans.
This action will save American consumers trillions of dollars.
Now, former Trump EPA Chief of Staff Mandy Gunasekara telling the National News Desk the $1.3 trillion Trump mentioned are regulatory savings directly related to this rule. $1.1 trillion from getting rid of these regulations and the cost they leave on vehicles, and the remaining $0.2 eliminating the crediting system like the start-stop feature.
If you break that down by the number of vehicles that are out there, that breaks down to $2,400 per vehicle that going forward will be reduced.
Gunasekara calling the move unbelievable in the sense that many didn't think this opportunity would present itself, but also because of the magnitude she believes it will have.
In reining in unfettered bureaucratic overreach into just about every facet of Americans' lives.
Now, experts say the legal challenges from this move could ultimately make its way all the way up to the Supreme Court. But if the Trump administration's repeal is upheld, it's likely no future EPA will be able to regulate carbon dioxide emissions. I'm Jeff Harris reporting from Washington.
New information, home sales fell sharply last month despite declining mortgage rates. According to the National Association of Realtors, existing home sales sank nearly 8.5% in January, the biggest monthly decline in nearly 4 years. Driving the slump are home prices, which continue to climb. As of January, the national median sales price rose to just under $400,000. Meantime, mortgage rates continued to ease, ending last week around 6.09%, nearly 1% lower than it was this time last year. Coming up, an 8-decade tradition ditched, the publication moving on from presidential polling, and the alleged mounting fraud investigation in Minnesota now spurring similar investigations in other states. Administrator of the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, Dr. Mehmet Oz, details the red flag he says lawmakers can easily miss. A massive welfare fraud scandal in Minnesota is drawing renewed scrutiny to other states as federal officials review programs that receive billions in taxpayer dollars, including Medicaid and related services. The National News Desk, Jen Jeffcoat, spoke with Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services Administrator Dr. Mehmet Oz to find out more.
One program under federal investigation right now is in the state of Maine. So tell us what you're seeing there and how much money could have been stolen from hardworking taxpayers.
Well, we're talking about across the nation, potentially $100 billion. That's a massive amount of fraud, obviously, and all this money could go back into taking care of folks who are most vulnerable, people who really need these services. But Jen, this is much bigger than just the money that's being stolen. When you're willing to steal someone's life as well, that's when I really get upset. And what we're seeing in many of these areas, and I'll speak to Maine for a second, you have the ability and the accusations, and there has been some OIG investigations that have been ongoing. It was a report filed 10 days ago to validate these. But essentially, in Maine, and this is sort of a cousin to what's going on in Minnesota, similar patterns, local communities sort of owning this problem, taking advantage of the system, folks not policing it from the outside, embarrassment about the fact it's sort of awkward discussion, accusations that these might be racially inflicted issues if you go after them, so you sort of shy away, which to me is a real problem because our goal is to take care of the most vulnerable. So you remember in Maine, it's not the autistic children that have been the focus of our concerns. It's folks who are older. So these are people over the age of 19 who also have learning disabilities. And in that setting, there's an ability for fraudsters to actually go into the person's house, take over the house essentially, put them in a closet or put them in a corner, and then not give them the care they need, not give them the food, not nurture them, not monitor them. There have been accusations that police are finding some of these folks outside the home, and they have to be taken back to the home, and when they get to the home, there's no one there taking care of them. These are the kinds of issues that are particularly concerning. But our letter was written about autism services in Maine, which have grown up, have dramatically increased in size, much faster than the actual increase in the number of truly autistic children, which is what happened in Minnesota. Now, what's the cause of this? Well, one possibility, and we know this is happening in Minnesota, is that you have parents being bribed, being given money in order to dishonestly claim their children have autism. Now, here's the concern. If there's one child in the neighborhood with autism, we have services to go take care of that child. There's money that goes to that family. But if every kid in the neighborhood claims they're autistic because their parents say they are, then now you've got no one in the neighborhood actually getting appropriate autism services. Right. And then expand this to what went on in California, where you have a 7-fold increase in services like for hospice. There's no way. It's impossible to have happened. But the amount of money which is being taken out of the system, and just in Los Angeles itself, we believe it's about $3.5 billion. It bankrupts the ability of the system to keep up care of the folks who truly need services.
Well, hopefully you guys can root out all the waste, all the fraud, all the abuse there. Dr. Mehmet Oz, Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services Administrator, thank you for joining us this morning. We appreciate it.
God bless you.
You too.
In Austin, Texas, schools are updating protocols following recent student walkouts to protest ICE and how districts will handle future demonstrations. According to Austin Independent School District's message to parents, administrators and district police will monitor these events within 300 feet of campus. Once the walkout leaves that area, Austin police will assist district police in keeping students safe. Even though the district says it complies with state education guidelines on walkouts, it doesn't mention anything about police security.
How do you see these protocols being beneficial for student safety?
I understand that we cannot send our staff or our admin along with our students. It is the district's responsibility to make our students safe.
Dozens of lawmakers in the state are now demanding answers from the Texas Education Agency, arguing current protocols are too vague. On January 30th, students across 14 school districts walked out of class and protested against ICE. New details. After more than 8 decades of tracking presidential approval ratings, Gallup says it will no longer do so. In a statement, the public opinion polling agency said in part that the move reflects an evolution in how Gallup focuses its public research and thought leadership. For decades, Gallup's presidential approval rating has been one of the top barometers measuring public opinion of the president's performance. Up next, the future of train travel on the East Coast. Your first look inside the modern luxury locomotive from Amtrak, as well as anti-ICE demonstrations missing their mark. The Maryland lawmakers making it clear more enforcements are on the way. We have reporters all across the country in your neighborhoods covering issues that matter to you. We are taking the pulse of America. And we start in New York, where problems with road salt are creating safety risks.
In the dead of winter, many municipalities across Monroe County are reporting delayed road salt deliveries, including the town of Clarkson.
Yeah, it's a huge concern. I mean, I don't remember it being this way 10, 12 years ago. Something's changed, so yeah, it needs to get figured out.
Clarkson's highway superintendent says road salt deliveries from its supplier, American Rock Salt, have been slowly arriving. Several highway superintendents tell me they've had to cut back on salt usage, even with our string of cold, wintry weather.
It's not easy to do that, obviously, because the safety is our biggest issue. And when we don't have salt, the roads aren't getting cleaned as well they should be.
We don't want ICE detention center here!
Protesters chanted and waved anti-ICE signs at passing cars in downtown Hagerstown Tuesday morning, upset that the Department of Homeland Security bought this massive warehouse just outside of town and may be planning to use it as an ICE detention center for as many as 1,500 people. But even as they protested, the Washington County Board of Commissioners was making it clear they support not only a detention center, but the mission of ICE in general, unanimously passing this resolution backing DHS, ICE, and local law enforcement.
The Board of County Commissioners of Washington County, Maryland, hereby expresses its full support for DHS and ICE.
7 News got a tour of what Amtrak says will be the future of train travel on the East Coast and elsewhere. It's called the Aero Train.
This represents the biggest investment in Amtrak's rolling stock and fleet in, as I understand it, 50 years.
Between buying the new trains and caring for them long term, $8 billion is being spent by Amtrak, which is partially funded by federal tax money.
Each one of these can pop out on each side.
Amtrak says the new Aero trains are being built with modern technology in mind, and they will be much more accessible for people who use wheelchairs. No more tiny bathrooms. Instead, they'll be this size.
Yeah, I think the risk-benefit ratio is definitely in the favor of, allowing your kid to try.
A growing number of parents planting flags on the football field, the youth leagues with more reward than risk. Violent hits are part of football, but a growing number of children across the country are turning to a no-contact version of the game. We are talking about flag football, one of the fastest growing sports in America. And as Spotlight on America's Dwayne Pullman shows us, preventing head impacts is a big reason behind the sport's surge in popularity.
This dome is home to flag football champions, the Toledo Dirty Birds.
That's a pretty big deal around here.
It is a big deal around here.
An elite program bursting with 1,500 kids, ages 5 to 15.
You good?
Yeah, very.
The Dirty Birds 7 and under team just won a gold medal in the first ever Amateur Athletic Union's Junior Olympics in Houston. Coach Raymond Martinez and his son Cameron helped lead the 8 and under team to an NFL flag football championship at the Pro Football Hall of Fame in Canton.
You won the NFL
We won
Nationals
yes,
for
sir.
8 and under.
Yes, sir.
Were you the quarterback?
Yes.
Flag football is now one of the fastest growing sports in America.
It's exploding.
According to the NFL, 2.4 million kids under the age of 17 played organized flag football in the U.S. in 2024, up from 1.7 million just the year before. That's a 71% increase. It's fast-paced, and players say it's fun.
Fun to play.
But arguably, the biggest factor in flag football's growth is safety, a big deal to parents.
Is this safer?
Yes.
And the young players.
Do you feel like it's safer for you?
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to head injuries, which even the coaches here worry about.
You're worried about head injuries.
We are.
In a study funded by the CDC, researchers found full contact tackle football players between the ages of 6 and 14 sustained 19 times more head impacts during a game than those who played flag football. That's why the CDC recommends no contact or flag football for all children 14 and younger. Even after chairing a scientific advisory committee that passed new, safer youth helmet standards, Dr. Robert Cantu, a leading expert on concussions in sports, is convinced children should avoid full contact football until high school.
For gosh sake, let's play flag football till high school.
Despite the recommendations, youth leagues for tackle football are still popular in places like Akron, Ohio.
Make the tackle.
Where young kids suit up for full contact.
Drive the feet. Good!
The director of the Akron Armor Youth Football Program, who's a medical doctor, says the reward outweighs the risk.
Yeah, I think the risk-benefit ratio is definitely in the favor of, allowing your kid to try.
While many might agree, a growing number of parents are planting flags on this football field for a safer way to play the game.
Flag is a whole nother level.
For Spotlight on America, I'm Dwayne Pullman.
Coming up next here, alleged illicit biolabs on U.S. soil linked to Chinese nationals. What investigators found, starting with the incident in California. Then overworked, and for what? Why millions of U.S. workers saw a slump in salary expectations. You're watching the National News Desk, America's News Now. Catch us live weekdays from 6 a.m. to 11 a.m. and 10 p.m. to midnight Eastern Time, and anytime online at thenationaldesk.com. We'll be right back. The National News Desk, locally covered, nationally connected. Immigration de-escalation, the bipartisan battle on Capitol Hill to use ICE officials to better protect the public during their missions.
You know, instead of talking about Ghislaine Maxwell, who hopefully will die in prison, you should be talking about Irina Zarutska.
I have a couple
who
of
died
other
on a
questions.
subway.
The Attorney General clashing with lawmakers over the Epstein investigation, from blasting redactions to properly protecting survivors.
I want them in operating rooms. NVIDIA is working with J&J on a simulated operating room.
AI entering the operating room, the new challenges experts say doctors are sure to face. From the nation's capital, this is the National News Desk, America's News. Now, thank you for being here with us. I'm Dee Dee Gatton, and we begin this half hour with a pillar of President Trump's second term, immigration. Lawmakers are pressing for greater accountability and transparency from immigration officials following the shooting deaths of 2 American citizens in Minnesota. National correspondent Christine Frizzell reports.
Federal immigration agents have for months been carrying out what President Trump often refers to as his mandate from voters.
We have a secure border. We have nobody coming in, and we're getting people out.
Those aggressive tactics, though, turned deadly last month when 2 Americans were shot and killed by federal agents in Minnesota, which prompted a hearing on immigration enforcement.
What's your biggest concern, especially after the deaths in Minneapolis?
That we're going to see more public executions and that the bodies will be piling up.
Republican Congressman Michael McCall has been calling for de-escalation.
The approach that Tom Homan's taking is de-escalating the situation. The violence has gone down. It's the way it should have been done in the first place. I mean, their job is not crowd control. It's to surgically go in and remove those under ICE detainers from the country.
An NPR PBS News Marist poll found 65% of those surveyed now say ICE's actions have gone too far, up from 54% in June of last year. But GOP lawmakers defended federal agents, insisting their job was made drastically more difficult by the millions of people who entered the country during the Biden administration.
For years, we witnessed a blanket refusal to enforce the law, wide open borders, catch and release policies, and uncontrolled mass migration.
Top immigration officials referring to the present moment as the deadliest operating environment in ICE's history.
In fiscal year 2025, death threats against ICE personnel increased more than 8,000%. Assaults on officers have skyrocketed over 1,400%. One officer in Minnesota had his finger bitten off by a protester.
Also top of mind at the hearing, a desire for a fair investigation into the deaths of Renee Good and Alex Preddy. While the acting ICE director could not share details at the hearing, lawmakers on both sides asked that they be given the full and complete accounting once the investigation has concluded. I'm Christine Frizzell for the National News Desk.
Pam Bondi was also pressed on the Trump administration's immigration crackdown this week. She blamed last month's fatal shootings of U.S. protesters by federal agents on Democratic lawmakers.
A few elected officials have declared that they are, quote, at war with the federal government, and encouraged widespread obstruction of law enforcement. This has resulted in avoidable clashes on the streets, as you've all seen.
The DOJ has subpoenaed 6 Minnesota officials to investigate if they obstructed federal law enforcement during the sweeping immigration operation. The state sued the Trump administration over the enforcement. The White House has since drawn down the number of ICE agents in the state. ICE has detained nearly 400,000 migrants in Trump's first year back in office, but less than 14% of those arrested have violent criminal records. That's according to a new report from CBS News. According to an internal DHS document, nearly 40% did not have any criminal record. 10% had assault charges, less than 1% had homicide charges, and just under 2% had sexual assault charges. Venezuela's top prosecutor is ordering the arrest of one of the closest allies of the country's opposition leader, Maria Corina Machado. The order to rearrest Juan Pablo Guanipa comes less than 12 hours after he was released from a detention facility. Venezuela's attorney general says Guanipa violated the conditions of his release. He was released with several other members of Machado's political organization. The Trump administration's blockade of oil to Cuba is deepening the ongoing energy crisis on the communist island. The government posted notices saying that starting tomorrow, jet fuel will not be available at 9 airports until March 11th. As a result, Canada's largest airline now says it is suspending flights. Air Canada says it will carry out ferry flights to get 3,000 customers home. Last month, Trump signed an executive order imposing tariffs on countries that gave oil to Cuba. The U.S. is sending 200 troops to Nigeria to train their military to fight Islamist militants. That's according to the Wall Street Journal. The troops are reportedly there to help local forces on how to use intelligence to identify targets for military strikes. But officials say the U.S. troops won't be involved in direct combat. A lawsuit in the EU against TikTok is raising eyebrows in the U.S. surrounding social media addiction and its impact on the human brain. Let's go to Emma Withrow from the Fact Check team. When regulators say a platform is addictive, and that has come up a lot, what does the science actually say behind it?
So that's where it gets a little bit nuanced, because social media addiction isn't like a current formal clinical diagnosis like substance use disorder. But the World Health Organization, though, they recognize gaming disorder, but not social media addiction as a standalone disorder. That said, though, behavioral researchers have studied how certain platforms have features that can reinforce habitual or compulsive use, which is what people are accusing TikTok of doing.
Well, so Europe is regulating this. As far as I've seen, the U.S. is still in the efforting stage. Does that line up with what you've been reading as well?
Yeah, for the most part. I mean, the U.S. doesn't have a comprehensive, federal law that regulates all of these addictive platform designs the way that the EU's Digital Services Act does. However, there are some related efforts happening here in the U.S. For example, Children's Online Privacy Protection Act, or COPPA, regulates data that collects the data that's collected from children under 13, but it focuses on privacy, not addictive design. There's also the proposed Kids Online Safety Act, often called KOSA. That bill would require platforms to take some steps to mitigate harms to minors, and specifically references these design features that might increase, screen time spent on platforms, but it hasn't become a law yet.
Well, we're looking forward to seeing more of this research. Emma, thank you.
Thanks.
For more on this Fact Check Team topic, including links to Emma's sources, just scan that QR code or visit thenationaldesk.com. California is suing 2 websites that distribute instructions for how to manufacture 3D printed ghost guns. The San Francisco lawsuit says the websites offer computer code instructions for more than 150 designs of lethal firearms and prohibited firearm accessories. Since 2021, agencies have recovered on average more than 11,000 ghost guns per year, according to the lawsuit. And developing now, staying in California, a federal judge temporarily blocks the state ban on most law enforcement officers wearing masks. The decision grants the Trump administration's push for a preliminary injunction, saying the ban discriminates against the federal agents since it doesn't apply to state law enforcement officers. However, a separate law that requires federal officers to have their name or badge number visible is in effect. Reports of botched procedures and rising injuries are raising new questions about artificial intelligence-guided surgical devices. The National News Desk, Angelo explains.
A stunning new report claims artificial intelligence now inside American operating rooms may be putting patients at risk. A Reuters investigation uncovered multiple cases where AI-guided surgical systems misidentified body parts, even mislocated instruments. A Gadget report revealing FDA reports tied to a sinus surgery system jumped from 8 before AI to more than 100 after the upgrade, along with at least 10 injuries, including fluid leaks and strokes. 2 lawsuits have been filed. The company behind the upgrade denies any link. But even as safety questions grow, AI in medicine is expanding fast. Ulf Surgical is teaming up with NVIDIA to deploy AI technology in operating rooms, promising faster, more efficient care.
I want them in operating rooms. NVIDIA is working with J&J on simulated operating rooms. I want them as assistants. I want them to be controlled remotely out in rural areas, but there has to be physicians involved.
And the momentum behind AI in medicine is only growing. The FDA keeps adding to its list of AI-powered medical tools. As of early December, that list has blown past 1,300 approved devices. The FDA acknowledges some of these reports do not prove causation and in some cases may lack critical details. In Washington, D.C., I'm Angela Brown.
The average worker is getting an underwhelming raise. The Bureau of Labor Statistics reports the employment cost index rose by 0.7% last quarter. That's the number that tracks how much employers spend on wages. Its pace hasn't been this weak since 2021. The index saw an annual raise of 3.4%. It wasn't a very happy holiday for retailers this year. Data from the Commerce Department shows retail sales in December didn't increase at all from November. Economists had expected them to jump 0.4%. It is a stark change for consumer spending. Last year, people kept buying despite fears around the stagnating job market and inflation. December's numbers suggest those fears may finally be impacting how much shoppers are willing to spend. New information now. Ghislaine Maxwell refused to answer questions about Jeffrey Epstein in a closed-door virtual testimony with lawmakers on the House Oversight Committee. The former Epstein confidant invoked her Fifth Amendment rights. She was questioned from a federal prison camp in Texas, where she's serving a 20-year prison sentence for sex trafficking. Maxwell argues she was wrongfully convicted. Lawmakers are trying to find who was connected to the late financier and convicted sex offender.
So I think we're finally going to get some answers, and hopefully at the end of the day we can do what our objective is in this hearing, provide justice for the survivors.
Comer faced pressure to depose Maxwell after he pressed for the committee to depose the Clintons. Both former President Bill Clinton and former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton agreed to testify later this month. King Charles says he will support British police working on the Epstein case. This comes after new allegations about Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. A report from the head of an anti-monarchy group claims he shared confidential information with Jeffrey Epstein. It involves the time when the former prince was a UK trade envoy, but he has denied wrongdoing in response to previous Epstein allegations. So to come, our team of correspondents breaks down this week in Washington, from the staggering national debt continuing to climb to immigration being used as a weapon in other countries. We'll be right back.
And welcome back to the National News Desk. Our Washington Bureau covers the nation's capital every day, and our team of correspondents reports on the important issues facing the country and how they impact you. The national debt climbing at a staggering pace. It hit $38 trillion 4 months ago and is expected to hit $39 trillion in April and potentially $64 trillion in 10 years, according to new congressional reports. National correspondent Kayla Gaskins, what's driving the spike, and what are budget watchdogs saying about the potential consequences?
So, Steve, the short answer is Washington just continues to spend more money than it's bringing in, but the interest on such a large number is also crushing. Interest payments on the national debt consume about 30% of the entire percent of the entire federal budget. Government watchdogs say this path is not sustainable. Now, amid the new data, the National Taxpayers Union is now renewing its call for a balanced budget amendment to the Constitution, arguing this could be the strongest tool to curb what it calls Washington's chronic overspending problem.
It is a national security problem. It's an economic problem. It's a pretty straightforward concept at its core. Just the notion that the Congress shouldn't spend more in expenditures than it takes in tax revenues each and every year. That's basically the premise that most families abide by, that most businesses abide by.
And a recent National Taxpayers Union poll found a majority of Americans, 54%, say cutting government spending is the best way to tackle this debt. Only 13% of those polled said raising taxes was the answer. And then, Steve, we got some unconventional options. Medicare and Medicaid Administrator Dr. Oz suggested the national debt could be reduced if Americans worked longer and delayed retirement, even if they only delay it by 1 year. He says that could have a significant impact on being able to pay down this debt. But Elon Musk also weighed in on the issue, and he argues only artificial intelligence and automation can prevent what he calls a financial collapse. Musk says without AI and robots, the U.S. is 1,000% going bankrupt. And Steve, that's a very Musk solution to this problem.
National correspondent Kayla Gaskins, thank you. Meanwhile, how to handle immigration has been a top issue for so many Americans, and indeed the Trump administration. National correspondent Christine Frizzau, you spoke to the author of a brand new book that alleges several countries for decades have used immigration as a weapon.
Yeah, Steve, in his new book, The Invisible Coup, Peter Schweitzer gives some pretty shocking examples of other countries really taking advantage of, what has often been American generosity when it comes to immigration. So he sort of starts out with Cuba and looking back to when Jimmy Carter was president, and a lot of people wanted to flee Cuba, and President Carter said, hey, we're going to welcome them with open arms. Well, he goes through example after example of Fidel Castro, then in charge in Cuba, sending, what Trump would call today, what President Trump would call the worst of the worst. We're talking about criminals and sex offenders, gang members, sending them to the United States. And he, kind of makes the case that crime went up. And then he looks at Mexico and says, what's going on with Mexico is very different. You have a lot of people who have just sort of been fleeing the economic conditions in Mexico to the United States. It's the closest country, setting up, families and taking over some communities here. And he says that is with the support of the Mexican government.
They view mass migration as a means by which they can exert sovereignty inside the United States by the simple fact that there is a mass of people here. They almost see it as a reversal of the 19th century when they ceded territory to us as a result of the U.S.-Mexican War. And you can find government officials and government reports that point to this fact. But it's not just language. They actually have set up an infrastructure inside the United States to politically activate people.
So one other thing I really want to mention that I'm going to be keeping an eye on that Peter writes about in his book is what's known as birth tourism. This is especially prevalent in China. Some of the wealthiest Chinese people paying someone for a visa and to transport them, plane ticket, and to stay in the United States while women have their children here so they can get United States birth certificates. They then go back to China. But Peter says there are about 1 million people living in China who have American birth certificates, and so therefore they can vote here. He says that this is going to be central to Donald Trump's arguments in the birthright citizenship case that we're going to see the Supreme Court weigh in on. So a lot of interesting ways that he argues a lot of countries are using immigration as a weapon.
National correspondents Christine Frizzell, Kayla Gaskins, excellent reporting as always. Thank you both for your hard work, and back to you.
Up next here, a twisted murder plot foiled in Maryland, the target whose name you may know. And Elon Musk ditching his dreams of Mars exploration, the planet he says he can break ground on much sooner. National News Desk, team of reporters is bringing you the headlines from coast to coast. We are taking the pulse of America, and we begin in Arlington, Virginia, where we're learning more about a Maryland man prosecutors say plotted to kill a key architect of Project 2025.
Dad's gun stash, body disposal guide. These are some of the notes investigators say they found in Colin DeMarco's iCloud account. Law enforcement sources tell ABC News the 26-year-old was targeting Russell Vogt, the director of the Office of Management and Budget. The complaint states DeMarco went to the victim's porch back in August, wearing a surgical mask and rubber gloves, and appearing to hide a gun, allegedly following his own tips from his digital notes. The suspect eventually left after asking a neighbor if anyone was home. That neighbor called police. The U.S. Marshals Service later ID'd DeMarco, and Arlington County Police searched his digital records. About 2 days before the incident, the complaint states DeMarco asked at least 3 people on the messaging platform Discord messages like, "Would you be willing to go for the Luigi approach?" Luigi Mangione is accused of killing the United Healthcare CEO.
In Fresno County, California, 3 registered sex offenders are suing the county over a new law limiting how many sex offenders can live in one single-family home. This law, which took effect on Friday, prohibits more than 6 registered sex offenders from living under one roof. The lawsuit claims the county board is violating sex offenders' rights.
And they know that we're very serious about it. That's why they got this
advocacy group for sex offenders to file a lawsuit, but it will not intimidate us.
A hearing is set for July. For now, any person violating the ordinance may face a fine of $1,000 or jail for up to 6 months. In American Fork, Utah, an Alpine School District school bus driver is urging drivers to obey traffic laws around bus stops. Matt Birch said he's had enough of people refusing to stop and speeding by while he's transporting students.
In 9 years, I've seen case after case after case after case where you're just talking inches.
Birch is leading a campaign to beef up the penalties for failing to stop. Right now, a first-time offense is a Class C misdemeanor. By comparison, though, stealing something less than $500 for the first time is a Class B misdemeanor. Trending now, SpaceX CEO Elon Musk says his rocket company is shifting its focus to the moon and away from Mars. Musk's plan prioritizes a self-growing city on the moon. It's not exactly clear what that means, but he believes his new goal could be achieved in less than 10 years, whereas a similar plan on Mars would take over 20. Musk adds that travel to Mars is only available every 26 months compared to every 10 days for the moon. NASA has given astronauts permission to bring their smartphones with them on missions before they had to leave their devices behind and use NASA-approved cameras to take pictures. The new policy is in effect and applies to the next mission, which is a SpaceX flight to the International Space Station this week. Still ahead, the stories making headlines next week and Super Bowl slump, why the Vegas sportsbooks weren't as hot as years past. Looking ahead to stories making headlines this week, the intensified ICE operation in Minneapolis will continue to wind down. Border Czar Tom Homan announcing the drawdown of immigration officers in Minnesota on Thursday. More than a dozen Democratic governors have joined forces to boycott a dinner at the White House. The event is part of the National Governors Association set to take place next week. Breaking with tradition, this year, President Donald Trump decided not to invite Democratic governors to the meeting. The luck of the Irish is hitting the Golden Arches next week. St. Patrick's Day season means the return of the Shamrock Shake. Can't believe it'll almost be that time. President Trump saying the new White House ballroom is progressing ahead of schedule and within budget. The ballroom is set to be 22,000 square feet, with the total expansion at roughly 89,000 square feet. Trump's most recent estimate for the ballroom was $400 million. A federal judge is expected to rule if the project can move forward without congressional approval. Also, Lindsey Vohn's father says he hopes the American Olympian is done with ski racing following her crash in the downhill final. Now, hospital officials say Vohn suffered a fracture in her leg. Speaking with the Associated Press, Vohn's father said she will not return to the games and will be going home. He declined to discuss her injuries, but described her as a strong person. The Seattle Seahawks dominated Super Bowl 60, but Nevada sportsbooks didn't have nearly as strong of a showing. The Nevada Gaming Control Board says $133.8 million was wagered on the game statewide, and that is the lowest Super Bowl betting handle in Nevada since 2016. Because of the lighter betting, books took in just under $9.9 million, the third lowest Super Bowl win total in the past decade. And that'll be all for us on this edition of the National News Desk, America's News Now. Don't forget, you can catch us live from 6 a.m. to 11 a.m. and 10 p.m. to midnight Eastern Time. Just check your local listings, and you can also watch us online and catch up with the latest headlines on thenationaldesk.com. Thanks for watching the weekend edition of the National News Desk. I'm Dee Dee Gatton here in Washington, and from all of us here, we hope you have a great week.